wanted to ask you, Mr. Lando, is President Trump a Russian asset?
Absolutely not, Senator. He's the President of the United States, duly elected by the American people.
Well, the reason I ask is many people back home have been asking me this question. And they say, if he was an asset, we would see exactly what he's doing now. For example, he proceeded to forward or express from the Oval Office propaganda that has been Russian propaganda, that Ukraine started the war, that Zelensky is a dictator. Second of all, he gave away key things on the negotiating table before the negotiations even started, ensuring U.S. would absolutely oppose any possibility of NATO membership for Ukraine. Third, he's cut off the arms shipments to Ukraine, completely undermining their ability against a massive neighbor next door with short supply lines and huge resources. Fourth, he's undermined the partnership with Europe, which has been essential to security over the last 80 years, a major goal of Putin's. And then he's done everything to discredit and dismean Zelensky on the international stage with the just shameful press conference in which he teamed up with the vice president to attack Zelensky. I can't imagine that if he was a Russian asset, he could do anything more favorable than these 5 points. What else could a Russian asset actually possibly do that Trump hasn't yet done?
Senator, the president has made it absolutely clear that his top priority is to try to bring peace and end an absolutely savage war. I know you're familiar with the savagery. This is turning into World War I style trench warfare now in eastern Ukraine. The president is an exceptionally gifted deal maker. He is probably the only individual in the entire universe that could actually stop this. The president understands, as part of his deal.
Well, let's turn to another of the folks here.
Carrots and sticks.
Thank you very much, since you're now off the topic I was raising. Mr. Whitaker, these 5 things that the president has done that are so favorable to Putin and so damaging to Ukraine and to our partnership with Europe, do you approve of them?
Well, Senator, thanks for that question. I'm just going to have to politely disagree.
At this point, I don't think there's any question that our president in name only, or Pino, Donald Trump, is a Russian operative. Now, hear me out on this. We've heard a lot recently on Truth Social about his desire to annex Greenland and Canada and Panama. And all of those places seem strategically not all that important for the United States. But when you think about it, Vlad would be really interested in all of those locations, especially when it comes to his desire to dominate the world. Trump has been more sympathetic with Russia than any other president in our history, and probably eclipses everyone in the world currently outside of leaders from China and North Korea. The geographic positioning of a place like Greenland is really important for defense if Russia were to ever strike, say, somewhere in NATO, simply because of its proximity, as well as its separation from the mainland of Europe, which would make it easily defensible, while also providing a position for the U.S. military and NATO allies to strike back from. Panama also has some pretty steep sanctions against Russia that effectively eliminates their ability to pass through the Panama Canal. And as we know, the Russian economy is on the verge of collapse through all of the steep sanctions they have already faced that have even heightened in the face of the Ukraine war. So ultimately, when you hear Trump going on these rants about things that are seemingly not connected and make no sense for the United States to pursue, it's important to remember that Putin is pulling the strings.
Named Krasnov. Let's talk about it. These claims were first made by the ex-KGB agent Al-Nur Masui on his Facebook page. He told us that in 1987, he was working for KGB in the 6th Department. The main area of responsibilities of the 6th Department was to recruit famous businessmen from capitalistic countries. One of them was Donald Trump. According to Musaev, Trump's recruitment happened in 1987 during his visit to Soviet Union about a potential hotel project in Moscow that of course was facilitated by Soviet officials. This is the photo I found online from that same year in St. Petersburg with his then wife Ivana Trump. KGB reports that were made public confirm that KGB in the early 80s made a change to their recruitment strategy, focusing more on Western figures, politicians for collaboration. The purpose of such policies would be to, of course, expand the agent network, one of which could be allegedly Trump, but also to, in general, create a more favorable environment to Soviet Union abroad. Trump has since replied to allegations of his Russian ties. This topic was especially hot during 2016's presidential elections, and he replied, quote, "I have nothing to do with Russia." As I was preparing this material, I realized that Trump actually has something to do with Russia, and I'm going to talk about it in part 2 of this video. But let me know what you think. Do you think that Trump is actually a Russian asset?
Donald Trump just put tariffs on 180 countries around the world. But guess what country didn't get a tariff? Russia. You can't even make this up anymore. Like, if I was writing this as a movie script, you'd have to say this is unbelievable. Is there any doubt? Done. Trump is a Russian asset. He put tariffs on nearly every country in the world, including Ukraine, just in case you're wondering, but not Mother Russia. Vladimir Putin is the greatest spy the world has ever seen. He got an asset to be the president of the United States. Krasnov lives.
Hello everyone, it's Anthony. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. And drop a comment. Tell me in the comment section, is Trump a Russian asset? A man who admires Kim Jong-un, Vladimir Putin, Ronald Reagan, probably everyone who has made our lives a living hell. A man who demands submission and obedience from his electorate. A man literally doing what in dictatorships they do, deploying military against those who are against him, against those who are the opposite of what he believes politically.
Here's a simple timeline of how Russia came to own Trump. So the KGB first began monitoring him in 1977 when he married Ivana from Czechoslovakia. They determined that Trump's ambition combined with willingness to be manipulated with flattery made him an easy target. In the 80s, Trump met with Soviet Ambassador Yuri Dubinin, who praised Trump with flattery and invited him to Moscow on an all-expense-paid trip to explore real estate. This trip was designed by the KGB to assess Trump as an asset. Immediately, on his return to the U.S., he began taking out newspaper ads attacking U.S. allies while praising Russia. In the 90s, Trump's businesses start failing and he falls into billions of dollars in debt. No U.S. banks will lend to him, so he turns to Russia, who lend him money and began buying his properties for way too much money. In 2013, he returns to Moscow. At this point, almost all of his debt is owned by Russia, and they continue talks about a potential Trump Tower in Moscow. It is on this trip that compromising material is collected on Trump, aka the Steele dossier, the famous tapes. Now Trump runs for president on a platform that matches the Kremlin's goals almost exactly. And here we are.
We are watching something extraordinary, soft power displays and a transfer of power that hasn't been seen in centuries. So the royal family hosted President Trump for dinner. This isn't unusual. It's part of their soft power diplomacy. What was unusual? President Trump strolled in with a jetpack of American tech titans. Sam Altman, Tim Cook, the CEO of Microsoft, the CEO of NVIDIA. On one hand, this is the UK and the US displaying a united front on technology and on the future. Also American soft power signaling that if you want access to the keys to the future, which these tech companies largely hold, remember, they fall in line with President Trump first. Something even bigger happening. I believe in a room with a king, with the President of the United States. The most powerful people in that room are actually the tech leaders. Technologies that will define the 21st century are entirely in the hands of the private sector. This is something that we haven't seen in centuries. I believe we are stepping into an era where technopolitics and tech power rivals state power and maybe overshadows it. It is really important to pay attention to and to understand. And I have a lot more to say on this topic.
Do you think Donald Trump is a Russian asset?
No, I don't. I am his longest-serving national security advisor, and if I had seen anything in the 17 months I worked for him that suggested that, I think I would have remembered it. I don't see it. I think he is what Vladimir Lenin once reportedly called a useful idiot. He knows nothing of history. He's not concerned about it. He doesn't read briefing papers. He thinks that international relations, state-to-state relations, are embodied in the personal relationship between heads of state.
Whether somebody is his friend or not.
He thinks he and Vladimir Putin are friends. I can assure you that's not how Putin sees him. Trump thinks he and Xi Jinping are friends. That's not how Xi Jinping sees it, but it shows how they can manipulate him. After Trump met with Kim Jong-un, the North Korean leader, in Singapore in 2018, he said, "We fell in love." I don't think that's how Kim Jong-un sees it, but this idea of the personal relationship, the ability to make a deal by looking at the party across the table and saying, "We'll make a deal," may work in Manhattan real estate, does not work internationally.
Okay, this is crazy. So Portugal's president said Donald Trump is a Soviet asset in his farewell speech. He called him out for always siding with Putin and upholding Russia's best interests. Look at this. He said the supreme leader of the world's greatest superpower objectively is a Soviet or Russian asset. Objectively, the new American leadership has strategically favored the Russian Federation. They have gone from being allies on one side to arbiters of the challenge. That's not just some random comment either. This is coming from a head of state, one of our allies, who is calling out what all of us have seen. Trump has sided with Putin over U.S. intelligence and undermined NATO time and time again. What makes this a big deal is the fact that comments like this are almost never said publicly by European leaders. This is historic. It shows how much global trust in the U.S. has eroded under Trump's leadership. Remember, multiple European leaders felt the need to come to the White House to meet with Zelensky and Trump because they did not trust him. These are some of our biggest allies that we're talking about here, losing faith in the United States. And the fact that Portugal's president felt confident enough to say this publicly really shows what the whole world is thinking. It's obvious. Donald Trump is a Soviet asset.
I am sure there is no link between the $400 million airplane, the $5.5 billion golf resort that Trump is building in Doha, and the hundreds of millions of dollars that the Qataris have invested in Witkoff Group projects after they learned that Steve Witkoff was a close confidant of Donald Trump's and continue to invest in, despite Steve Witkoff being the U.S. Special Envoy to the Middle East, even though he has no diplomatic experience. I'm sure there's no link between those things and the NATO-like security guarantee that Trump just signed in an executive order sidestepping past Congress. This will treat any attack on Qatar as a threat to the United States of America, and that we will take any diplomatic, economic, and military, that's right, American boots, to defend Qatar. So the president is offering illegal security guarantees to a country that's been harboring Hamas in luxury hotels in Doha and financing terrorism. When are you guys going to learn that Trump is not America first? He's Trump first.
Hello everyone, it's Anthony. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. You have watched from Americans making the analysis. You have watched a US senator asking questions if Trump is really a Russian asset. So let me make my analysis, and you, my viewer, will conclude if Trump really is a Russian asset or just maybe it's a conspiracy theory. So drop your comments and let's discuss. So my name for this video, for the purpose of this video, my name is Donald Trump. My code name, my KGB code name is Black Swan. I know majority of you didn't vote for me. And now the minority are defining your future. MAGA, who make less than 10% of the population, despite you warning them, they proceeded to elect me, Donald Trump. So Vladimir Putin's greatest achievement is not the takeover of Ukraine, but the downfall of United States. So I'm a comrade and I'm in the White House. I might claim that it was an hoax, but during the first administration, a Senate bipartisan committee led by Marco Rubio came to conclusion that Russia was involved through WikiLeaks and election interference. We are sleepwalking into a dictatorship and totalitarianism. And this country will no longer be USA anymore, but USSA, United Soviet States of America. I was in a financial ruin in the 80s, and just like a phoenix, I rose from the ashes because my father gave me 400 million worth of inheritance. But again, I went bankrupt 6 times. So how did the prodigal son pull himself out of the rubble? Let's talk about money laundering. How does real estate launder money? You can integrate large sums of illegal money into the legal economy without much scrutiny. Because of high value transactions, opaque ownership, lack of regulatory oversight, stability and appreciation, all cash transactions of evaluation and undervaluation. Because you saw in the case of Letitia James, Trump overvalued his assets. So here comes the question: why would Russian oligarchs start gobbling up Trump's real estate when he was on a financial free fall? Why would they wait for everything to fall and come take everything at bargain? Because it was a way to launder large sums of money. Trump is not a self-made man. He is a made man. In 2008, during an interview, Donald Trump Jr. said that Russians, oligarchs, make a huge chunk of their investments and that there was large sums of money flowing from Russia. So Putin saw a man who was drowning in debt and a man who had damaging Epstein files secrets as a perfect example of a Russian asset. So Trump didn't run for presidency to save this country. He ran for presidency to save both himself and Russia from the collapse due to this ongoing war in Ukraine. So guys, until the next video, thank you for your attention to this matter.